All right. I should be live, and if I am, please let me know in the chat. If you can hear me and see me, that would be great, and we can get started so that way we can discuss everything going on right now with the Ukrainian and Russian peace proposals, as well as the fact that the West isn't ready for this to escalate to anything greater, which has been demonstrated by the UK here recently, as well as some other NATO nations. So, I want to go ahead and get right into it tonight. Let's see, we have Red Dawn Readiness here. We have Fish Ranch here. Derek, Lone Wolf, Canada is in the house. I can appreciate it, and thank you for being here. And we have 5x5x6 by NATO, says HeartGold556. Not sure exactly what that's referring to in full, but I do appreciate the enthusiasm. And of course, we have some other excellent people here in the chat tonight, which I am gladly going to say hello to later on. Harbor Prepper with the 5x5, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for always supporting the channel. And of course, Kevin Purdy, Shadow Prepper, and everybody saying that things are sounding and looking good. Rocket made it, and now we know we can actually move forward. So, Gen X Gemini, good to see you. Thank you so much. Let's just start off with something really quick, just because I want to touch base on it. Not because this is super relevant to tonight's conversation, but because I know people are going to bring it up or at least expect some level of discussion, right? So I just want to make sure we touch on it really quickly. We had the situation in Boulder, Colorado, which I do like to keep things domestic when possible when it comes to discussing certain events that are occurring. And here's the thing that I just want to kind of make sure everybody's aware of, okay? This was an Egyptian national who came in here illegally in the country and started using makeshift, incendiary devices against a group of protesters that were, supporting Israel, I believe. And we have, they're trying to bring attention to the current hostage scenario that's still ongoing within the Gaza conflict. But the biggest takeaway from this whole event, right, which is what I really want everyone to kind of be aware of, is that it didn't have to happen to the degree that it did. This is why we have the Second Amendment. This is why we live in the United States of America. People should not be able to act like that with impunity and be able to injure up to 12 people now is the official number of people who are injured by that terrorist, which is exactly what he's being labeled as and exactly what he is, because he was using violence to try to implement a political will against other people. So that's not going to fly where I live, and that's not going to fly in a majority of America, especially in the rural parts. But we are in a situation now where our major cities and cities of a certain variety, like Boulder, Colorado, have a situation where people aren't armed and aren't willing to defend themselves and are unsure of whether or not they're able to because of the way the law works in that area. So just be aware that if you're going to be anywhere near an event that has anything related to that conflict in the Middle East, you're asking for trouble. You just are. They're targeted events at this point in time. That's something that was well demonstrated in that situation. And we also know that someone that has the means and capability of self-defense, when it comes to somebody using homemade incendiary devices to try to literally light people on fire, that person's not going to be very effective if one singular person had the means to deal with that threat. So be prepared, have situational awareness, have a means of self-defense, and also avoid places that are likely to be targeted by some of these unhinged human beings. All right. I wanted to touch base on that because the whole situation had me very upset. What's up, David Baise? Good to see you. I just don't understand. Michael D223 says Boulder being the commie hellhole that it is. And that's the problem, right? So we're talking about a place where people don't feel they have the opportunity to defend themselves and don't have the ability to, save other people's lives or save them at least from horrendous injury, all due to politics rather than, what the spirit of the country is when it comes to self-reliance and individualism. So here we are. Benjamin, good to see you. VivB, good to see you as well. And of course, yes, the Supreme Court likes to be very choosy about what cases they take. And of course, that's a problem for us in general. Now, let's talk about this peace proposal situation. But just to keep everybody up to date and to make sure everyone's on the same page as to where we're at in this entire scenario, I want to just go over that whole drone attack situation, the sneak attack that occurred in Russia that was perpetrated by Ukraine, and obviously everybody has their own, different, analogies as to like who's behind it and who is really at fault and everything else. And it's like, it doesn't really matter because it happened. And we all know who Russia is going to assume was behind it in the sense of like what people were involved, right? We are being told that this is mostly being organized and pulled off by the SBU, which is basically Ukrainian intelligence services, but like I said, that's all what we're being told versus, what the likelihood of it having foreign involvement really is. So this is just something to give you a quick overview. And no, we don't just look at CNN or other, news outlets that have lost a lot of credibility over the last few decades, but we go all over the place. And I thought that this was actually a decent overview to kind of go through this really quickly for people who aren't up to date as to what happened. Okay, so Ukraine's drone attack against Russia airfields was audacious and daring, but most of all, it was meticulously planned and flawlessly executed. Kiev struck where it could make a difference, damaging or destroying military aircraft that Moscow had been using to terrorize Ukrainian civilians with near-daily aerial attacks. This is from CNN. This is their words, not mine. This is what they're reporting. The Ukrainian Security Service said 41 Russian aircraft were hit, including strategic bombers and surveillance planes, although it's unclear how many were taken completely out of action. Now, my understanding is that because of the way the supply chain has been damaged over the years and the attrition that Russia has been experiencing when it comes to this conflict, even if you just do a minor amount of damage to some of these aircraft, it's not something you can just easily replace. Like, they don't just have parts for their, V-50 aircraft laying around all over the place just ready to be reapplied and repaired and everything else. So this is something that should be aware of. Here's a map that kind of lays out just how far some of these strikes actually made it to. So these are the airfields that were targeted, and you can see like Ukraine is all the way over here on the left, and we have, Ukrainka all the way over here on the right, this airfield in Russia that was attacked. So they are really deep within Russian territory during this situation. Here's some pictures of the drones that were said to be used in the attack, which I found to be very interesting as well. And what I want to kind of show you here is that these are the level of munitions that they were using and the military equipment they were using to pull this off, and it's very low tech in the grand scheme of things. Of course, drones are high tech to a degree, but when it comes to the overall cost of such an attack, it's very low with a huge return on investment. And so you have these panels right here showing these drones hidden in the wooden cavities or in the cavities of wooden sheds, but the way this worked is that they had a remote function that opened the lids of these wooden containers and allowed the drones to exit once the attack began. And you can see here that these are what these wooden containers look like. So on the back of cargo trucks, they weren't very suspicious, and there wasn't really a lot of reason to believe that these were, drone launching cargo units. And then, of course, you have some video here of the drones actually launching out of these container trucks. That kind of just shows you how that form and function worked. And the biggest thing for me is, of course, there's a lot of damage done. There was damage done to Russia's nuclear forces, which is always escalatory in nature when it comes to what could happen thereafter based on the level of threat that they feel that they are enduring. But at the same time, it's also something that could easily happen just about anywhere else in the world. And that's something that I find concerning because of how easy this was for them to perpetrate. They spent a year and a half planning it. They launched 117 attack drones to 4 different airfields, although this map shows 5, so maybe additional information is coming out at this point in time where it's giving us, even more of an attack than what we originally understood. And then at the same time, this can be done anywhere in the world because right now Russia is of decent military technology. This is not like a third world country, right? So they have a decent level of military technology and military deterrence while also being in an open and hot active war, and this was still allowed to happen, which just goes to show you how easily it could occur, here in the United States or in the UK or any other part of the world. And so this is something you should definitely be considering when it comes to your own personal preparations regarding if there was to be an attack here on U.S. soil or wherever you are by a foreign adversary. So let's see here. David Baise says, this FUD is just fine. Good evening to you, Dave Sickles. Good to see you as well. We also have Yugo Survival. What's up, MP? Well, what's up to you also? All right. Rocket says, it was brilliant, though. And it was. I mean, it clearly worked. And, of course, if something is successful, then there was, good planning involved. But it also is concerning because what's, saying that something like that couldn't happen anywhere else from anyone else. And so that's something that I have to weigh heavily in my mind now when it comes to personal preparation and things of that nature. Give me 1 second. I have a compressor that decided to turn on randomly and I want it to go away now. Why? Why do they always turn on in the worst possible time. Okay, here we are. Now, let's talk about what Russia is proposing in order to accomplish peace through this Ukrainian conflict right now. And I don't find it to be something that's going to work. This, in my opinion, this is going to fail. I don't think these terms are agreeable for Ukraine based on historical context and based on the demands within. And I think that this is going to fail in the sense of a negotiating tactic. So I'm not sure if they're going to come back with amendments or anything else along those lines. But this is what Russia is proposing. And so I want to make sure we go over it because this is only like the second round of peace talks since this conflict began and should have been an opportunity to try to find some sort of resolution. And I don't think we're necessarily finding that here, okay? Now, real quick, Rocket says using AI is a bit scary. And you know what? That is the new nuclear arms race. And it is unfortunate that that's where we're heading because it's unavoidable at this point in time because of how prolific it's become. And now we're talking about having to take away regulations and implement additional infrastructure regarding nuclear power in order to keep up with China when it comes to the AI arms race and everything else they're involved. And that's going to have its own consequences in the future that may be unforeseen at this point in time. But regardless, we are on the cusp of that being a necessity and an unavoidable outcome when it comes to AI being integrated not only militarily, but just in life in general, and that's just where we are. So let's see. Right now, the poll that has 150 votes for will Ukraine accept the terms presented by Russia for peace, 95% of people say no. Now, first off, I think some people are going to say no to that just because they don't think that there's actually a desire for peace from certain powers within this conflict right now, and I think that's a reasonable assumption to have based on previous information that we've received. But I also think it's because this proposal isn't necessarily going to work. Andrew Little, you made it to a live, and you like to replay and listen to the video during work. Well, you know what? You can watch it twice if you want, and I would appreciate that. So thanks for making it, and thank you for being here and for supporting what I do. I really appreciate it. Now, let's talk about this proposal just so you guys can see exactly what's on the table. I know this is maybe not going to be like super exciting, but this is stuff that you should be aware of right now because this is, historical in the sense of like if this was successful, it would be considered historical. And it could be technically. I don't think it will be, but this is just where we're at. So, Section 1, key parameters for definitive settlement. International legal recognition of the incorporation into the Russian Federation of Crimea, the LPR and the DPR, and the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. Full withdrawal from these territories of armed forces of Ukraine units and other Ukrainian paramilitary formations. Neutrality of Ukraine, implying its refusal to join military alliances and coalitions, as well as a ban on any military activity by third-party states on Ukrainian territory, and the deployment of foreign armed formations, military bases, and military infrastructure there. AKA, they don't want the U.S. operating there, they don't want the U.K., Germany, or any of these other countries who are currently working there, right? France, everybody. Termination of all existing international treaties and agreements inconsistent with the provisions of paragraph 2 of this section, and refusal to conclude any such agreements in the future. Confirmation of Ukraine's status as a state without nuclear or other weapons of mass destruction, with a direct ban on their receipt, transit, and deployment on Ukrainian territory. So no nukes in Ukraine whatsoever, no chemical weapons, biological weapons, or anything along those lines. Establishment of maximum limits for the size of the AFU and other Ukrainian military formations, the quantity of armaments and military equipment and their permissible specifications, dissolution of Ukrainian nationalist formations within the AFU and National Guard. They're going after the nationalist units within the Ukrainian military, likely because of historical context, right? Guarantees of the full rights, freedoms, and interests of Russian and Russian-speaking population, granting the Russian language official status within Ukraine. Legislative prohibition of the glorification and propaganda of Nazism and neo-Nazism, dissolution of nationalist organizations and parties. Lifting of all current economic sanctions, bans, and restrictive measures between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, and refusal to impose new ones. Resolution of issues related to family unification or reunification and displaced persons. Waiver of mutual claims for damages incurred during hostilities. So saying that they can't hold each other financially responsible for everything that's happened during this conflict. Removal of restrictions imposed on the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. Gradual restoration of diplomatic and economic relations, including gas transit, transport, and other connections, including with third-party states. Okay. Now, Section 2, here's the ceasefire conditions. Option 1, commencement of complete withdrawal of the AFU and other Ukrainian paramilitary formations from the territory of the Russian Federation, including the DPR, LPR, and the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions, and their pullback from the borders of the Russian Federation to a distance agreed upon by the parties in accordance with provisions to be approved. Now, just so you're aware, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but the ceasefire was not accepted. But there has been a prisoner exchange accepted, so there is some progress, but they did not agree to these ceasefire conditions, but we're still going to go through them really quick so you're aware. Okay, option 2, package proposal. Prohibition on redeployment of the AFU and other Ukrainian paramilitary formations, except for movements aimed at withdrawal from the borders of the Russian Federation to a distance agreed upon by the parties. Cessation of mobilization and commencement of demobilization. Cessation of foreign supplies of military products and foreign military assistance to Ukraine, including the provision of satellite communication services and intelligence data. Obviously, we know what that's referring to. Elimination of military presence of third countries on Ukrainian territory. Cessation of participation of foreign specialists in military operations on Ukraine's side. Guarantees of Ukraine's renunciation of sabotage and subversive activities against the Russian Federation and its citizens. Keep in mind that this recent drone attack was considered a terrorist attack by the Russian government. Okay? Establishment of a bilateral center for monitoring and control of the ceasefire regime, mutual amnesty for political prisoners and release of detained civilians, lifting of martial law in Ukraine, announcement of the date for elections of the president of Ukraine and the Verkhovna Rada, which must take place no later than 100 days after lifting of martial law, signing of an agreement in the implementation of provisions contained in Section 1. So, and these are the parameters for the definitive settlement of the conflict, and then these were the ceasefire conditions. Like I said, those conditions were not agreed upon, at least as of today, and there is some progress, but not as much as you would have hoped, I assume. Section 3, sequence of steps and timeline for implementation. See, this isn't very long, we're almost there, I promise. Work commences on drafting the treaty text. A 2 to 3 day ceasefire is declared for collection of bodies of the fallen in the gray zone. 6,000 bodies of AFU servicemen are unilaterally transferred to the AFU. A ceasefire memorandum is signed with specific dates for fulfillment of all provisions, determining the date for signing the future treaty on final settlement. A 30-day ceasefire regime takes effect from the moment the AFU withdrawal begins. Complete withdrawal of AFU units from the territory of the Russian Federation and full implementation of the package agreement must be completed within these 30 days. Elections are conducted and government bodies are formed in the territory of Ukraine. The treaty is signed. The signed treaty is endorsed by a legally binding UN Security Council resolution. The treaty is ratified, enforced, and implemented. So, that is the total proposal from Russia for peace negotiations regarding the Ukrainian conflict as of right now. You can see why, at least in my opinion, that's likely going to fail, because I don't find the agreements there within to be something that Ukraine is likely going to sign up for. Basically seceding all of the territory that Russia currently has control over and basically removing all military support that they currently have, even including intelligence data gathering and everything else related to it. All foreign military support has to disappear and go away. So basically leaving themselves completely helpless and defenseless and just trusting that Russia won't do anything else and will only have accomplished more than they originally set out for. So I don't find that to be something most militaries or governments would just say yes to, right? Now, for the greater good of the world and peace and avoiding nuclear conflict and everything else related to that, is that something that some people might say you should just say yes to anyway to get this over with and be done with it? I assume so, because none of us want to see nuclear conflict occur. But at the same time, I can understand why a country like Ukraine wouldn't just say, okay, I guess if that's what we got to do, because these terms are obviously one-sided and clearly make it so that they have no other options in the sense of future conflicts regarding defense or resolution. So that's the peace proposal, and that's why I wanted to go over it with you all tonight, because the likelihood of it working is not high, right? So that means that the conflict possibly escalates based on this recent drone attack. That was 1.5 years in the making. 1.5 years of planning, 1.5 years of coordination, and then finally the attack actually was successful. So what else is in the planning and coordination stage, right? What else has been being planned for the last year, year and a half, 2 years? I don't know, but there's probably more, right? So we have to be aware of that fact as well, that these attacks could continue and could eventually reach that point of actual escalation. Now, the fact that Russia hasn't responded to it is interesting. I think that they likely will at some point, but not on anybody's schedule. And just to kind of give you guys something to think about, right? Especially in the preparedness community and when it comes to other content and live streams and everything else that you obviously watch, which I think is good to get a good, well-rounded perspective on everything. It's good to have additional points of view. We were told Israel was supposed to strike Iran this weekend, right? Remember that? Russia was supposed to strike with Oreshnik missiles back in May. On May 9th, they were supposed to hit Kiev, right? Anytime people are applying dates and deadlines to some of these military actions from this current conflict, you can't assume it's going to happen. The likelihood is actually that it won't, because these people don't operate on whatever timeline the media has access to and whatever timeline some random guy on YouTube like myself has access to. If I can tell you about it, there's a likelihood that it's not going to come to fruition, because these are decisions that are far and beyond what I have access to, right? So just remember that, because all I heard this past week was that Israel was going to strike Iran this weekend, and now it's Monday, and here we are, right? So I just want to make sure to touch base with you on that as well, and that's why I try not to apply hard deadlines to the information that I put out and to the conversations that we have, because I think that it generally ends up being misleading or useless. That's just the reality of it, okay? Now, let's see here. Got some good people in the chat. What's up, VivB? Good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Hustlebones. It's not about Zelensky wants. It's about what the military-industrial complex wants. And that has some truth to it, of course, because we know for a fact that there's a lot of money being put out there when it comes to defense manufacturing and contracting and everything else related to how you become profitable through war. So obviously, I think that's also part of the equation and something that we can't necessarily ignore. But my hope is that eventually things of this nature go away because we need them to, or else if we just fight war into perpetuity, some point in time, in my opinion, a tripwire is going to get crossed that maybe wasn't supposed to, and something really, really bad is going to happen. And that's just the reality of it. I mean, that you can't fight war into perpetuity and expect everything to go the way it's supposed to based on what these defense contractors and manufacturers and everybody else involved in the profit version of a war, what they want it to do. It's not going to always work out the way that they want. So here we are, right? Now, TacticalMuffinTop Demo Man, good to see you. Glad you're here. We also have Twin Arrow Survival 2.0. Good evening to you as well. And I always appreciate everybody being here, and I appreciate you guys checking in, So, let's talk about the fact that during these peace talks, there also was some private meetings held. Now, to me, this is obviously, right? This should be happening. And just so you guys know, I'm not a supporter of RT or the news that they put out or anything like that, because I'm aware of the fact that it's state-run propaganda in many ways. So I'm not trying to promote this as the end-all be-all of media when it comes to reporting accurate information. But when it comes to this particular topic that's occurring right this second, and when it comes to the information that's being provided by the Russian government regarding these peace proposals and these talks, they have the access and they have the sources for it, versus the other media that I usually reference doesn't seem to have this information quite yet, or hasn't had a chance to verify it, or whatever it might be. So I just wanted to make sure to address that, because I don't trust RT to be some kind of infallible resource, but it is what we have access to right now that's giving us this information at the rate that it is, versus getting it from someone else later with the same exact level of information. So, Russian and Ukrainian chief negotiators held secret private meeting. The unannounced conversation lasted longer than the public talks, an anonymous source told RT. Okay, Vladimir Medinsky, the head of Russia's diplomatic delegation at the Istanbul talks, held a private bilateral meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart, Rustem Umerov, which played an important role in preparing the general session of negotiations on Monday. The second round of direct talks between Moscow and Kiev concluded on Monday after more than an hour. Prior to the formal session, Medinsky and Umerov or Umarov, I believe is what it actually is, held an unannounced meeting that helped facilitate the broader negotiations. There was a meeting. It played an important role in the preparation of the general session, Medinsky told reporters, without offering further details. A source who requested anonymity told RT that the private conversation lasted around 2.5 hours. During talks in Istanbul, both sides exchanged memorandums outlining their respective proposals for resolving the conflict. Kiev's delegation took Russia's draft document for review and is expected to issue a formal response at a later date, Medinsky said following the session. The two sides also agreed to their largest prisoner of war exchange to date. According to Medinsky, the swap will involve all sick and severely wounded POWs as well as all prisoners under the age of 25 and will include at least 1,000 people from each side, possibly more, the presidential aide noted. Okay. In addition, Moscow will unilaterally return the remains of 6,000 Ukrainian service members to Kiev next week to allow for a proper Christian burial, he added. Russia has also proposed a multi-day ceasefire in several frontline areas to facilitate the recovery of fallen soldiers' bodies and prevent potential disease outbreaks as temperatures rise with the onset of summer. So we do have those levels of progression there. I'm not sure how much progress that's actually going to make, but I am sure that there's something occurring in the sense of these conversations being productive to at least some degree. So it's possible that we might be finding ourselves towards some sort of resolution, especially with some of these cooperations, but we can't assume that we're just going to get there magically, because the day before these peace talks in Istanbul, there was a massive drone attack on Russia's nuclear forces. So the negotiating tactics here are interesting, to say the least, but I do believe Ukraine was trying to have leverage on Russia when it came to why they chose the date and time of the attack. They used this attack as leverage in these negotiations to say, look, we can do more. We have more. They're ready to deploy. It's up to you whether or not more happens and whether or not you can sustain it, right? And so I think that that's what we're seeing, because otherwise an attack like that would be clearly a negative addition to any type of negotiations. But in this situation, I'm assuming that it's being used as leverage for additional attacks that are already in process or already operational, besides actually hitting, the trigger, right? So now let's see here. VivB says, my throat hurts from the hazy, poor air quality outside. Just a few minutes. It's moving through Minnesota now. Get ready. It's headed south towards the Gulf Coast. Now, I will admit that I've had terrible air quality here in the last few days as well in North Dakota, and it's all from the fires in Canada, and it's just really bad. So it's less bad now, so I think you're on the tail end of it since it's passed me quite a bit at this point. Still not great, but I can actually go outside now, whereas 2 days ago, I just didn't go outside because it was that bad. So take care of your health and make sure you're being smart about smoke, because it is problematic. Vegas Backyard Prepper finally made it. Hello, everyone. Well, hello to you as well. Thank you for joining in, and thank you for being here. Now, Desert 1776 says, I'm so tired of hearing about Little Z-Man and Ukraine. And I understand that, and I agree. It's been a long, arduous conflict that has dominated the headlines for quite some time and been top of mind in the sense of conversation related to preparedness. However, these are recent events that have led to major escalation, at least in my opinion, and peace talks that could lead to resolution, all happening within a 24-hour period. So it is worth discussing at this point in time, and it is worth discussing right now, but it's also something that I understand the level of fatigue from, based on the fact that it's been going on for so long, and every time we talk about it, things either don't happen the way we anticipated or nothing happens, right? So, and I get it. I 100% understand. My goal with the live streams in general is to provide information that I think is relevant to preparedness and things that you should be paying attention to, or at least be aware of, and then applying it to whatever that works for you in the sense of your planning. So, and sometimes I just say words and they don't make sense, and I'm okay with it, all right? All right, now, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the prisoner swap really quick. Well, you know what? We just went over that. I'm just going to skip that. We don't even need to talk about it. Now, I do want to remind everybody that right before the drone attack in Ukraine, or in Russia by Ukraine, there was actually some sabotage of infrastructure as well. So in the lead up to all of this, there was even more going on in the country of Russia perpetrated by Ukraine, and it was deadly, and it had immense impact on infrastructure. So 2 deadly bridge collapses in Russia near Ukraine blamed on deliberate explosions, okay? So this happened on Saturday, the day before the drone attack occurred, and this, of course, got covered up quite a bit by that drone attack because of how massive it was, but these things were happening in a ramp up towards that and right up until the point of these peace negotiations. So just remember, like, these things have not slowed down. In fact, they seem to have escalated quite a bit. 2 bridges collapsed in separate Russian regions bordering Ukraine on Saturday night, killing 7 people and injuring dozens, with Russian officials alleging the bridges have been deliberately blown up. The incidents occurred amid uncertainty over whether Kiev diplomats will participate in a new round of peace talks proposed by Moscow on Monday in Istanbul, and amid growing frustration in Washington over the impasse between Russia and Ukraine. The first bridge collapsed late Saturday in the Bryansk region, crashing onto railway tracks and derailing an approaching train. Bryansk Governor Alexander Bogomaz said Sunday morning. Unfortunately, there are 7 fatalities, he posted on Telegram, later saying that 47 people had been hospitalized. Hours later, in Russia's Kursk region, a railway bridge above a road collapsed while a freight train was crossing it, according to the region's acting governor, Alexander Kinstein. One of the train drivers has injured his legs. The entire team was taken to the hospital, he said on Telegram, adding that the locomotive had originally caught fire before it was extinguished by emergency services. So this stuff is happening. This is clearly the work of saboteurs, and it is clearly, 5th generation warfare or asymmetrical warfare, or whatever you want to refer to it as at this point in time. But those things are happening inside of Russia, like, on a regular basis, right? So we are moving forward in that regard, and they are absorbing these attacks and absorbing this additional damage, and they're playing them off, and they're not necessarily verbally escalating anything regarding these attacks, which I also find to be interesting because they are clearly escalations, they're clearly embarrassments, but they are not being talked about. So what would be the reason for that? Let's talk about that here in just a second. So, got some good people here. Harbor Prepper, hard to store enough since you always need more. Better to stock up on purification gear, etc. So here's the thing, especially with water. I think that, that's the wrong Harbor Prepper comment. So, so one of the things when it comes to water is that you need to have water stored up even if you have access to water. And so what I mean by that is that if you have rain catchment, you have a stream on your property, you have a well, whatever it is that you have that you can keep working throughout an emergency in the sense of like a renewable water supply, you should still have water storage as well. And the reason behind that is because obviously, any water supply can be cut off or contaminated, and it is something that could just happen that you need to be prepared for and have backup systems in place in order to deal with that. But the other reason is for convenience as well. There are times where accessing stored water supplies is a better idea than using your renewable water source for whatever reason. And the other thing that you need to keep in mind too is that even if you have purification gear and things of that nature, you need to have water to purify in order for that to make sense, right? So I think having all that gear is important. Having filters, having water treatment, having access to all those things is a good idea. But if you don't have water to treat, then you're still out of luck. So my suggestion or advice regarding some of that is that if you're going to get some water stored up, which you should definitely do, no matter what your situation is, you should have water stored away, and then you should have access to some form of renewable water source if possible. I mean, like I had that video out a while ago about that atmospheric water generator. It was really expensive, but it is a dehumidifier that's 100% created and put together in a way that's specifically designed to give you purified, filtered water right out of the air as long as the humidity level is high enough, right? So like that's even a renewable water source as long as you have a way to power that unit. But regardless, you also should, I think this is a good idea for everyone, so no matter what your situation is, I would do this if I were you. I think you should locate a natural water source in your area and scout it out. Take a look at it, get some ideas about how you would access that water during an emergency, and have that as part of your redundancy planning, right? Because you only have 3 days to go without water. So if you don't have access to renewable water or you don't have enough water stored up, you're going to have to go get water somewhere. And if you don't know where that water is, looking for it at that point in time is not very helpful. You need to have a way to go get it and be aware of it before things are bad, so that way you have the best strategically sound plan for how you're going to take care of that while everybody else is running around panicking, right? So that's just my 2 cents on that, and I just wanted to mention it. So thanks for bringing that up, Harbor Prepper. I appreciate it. And it looks like you're responding to Nick, who I also appreciate, always hanging out and supporting the channel. And that was something I wanted to touch on because water is that important. Regardless of all the crazy crap happening in the world right now regarding Ukraine and Russia, World War III, or anything else like that, we all need water, right? No matter what. So D-Fit, thank you for the super chat. $20, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Hold on, stay strong. When it's on, it's on. I mean, hard to argue with that, right? We all got to get through it. We all got to do what we can in the meantime. And then when things happen, they're happening, right? So that's when you flip the switch. You start doing the things that you had planned on doing, and you're going to have to adapt. No matter how well your stuff is planned out or organized, you will have to adapt in some form or fashion just based on circumstance, right? So thank you for that so much, D-Fit. And honestly, I said thanks, man, but I don't know if you're a man. So thank you, person, woman, man, whatever you are. I appreciate you. So let's go ahead and jump into this whole situation is kind of odd. So people are claiming that this is Russia's Pearl Harbor event. I find that to be dishonest in some ways. It's definitely not the same. Is it an attack on their soil? Yeah. Is it unprovoked to the same level as Pearl Harbor? No, they're literally in a hot open conflict where they are already currently invading Ukraine's territory and at war with Ukraine and fighting a hot conflict with them while occupying their country, right? So like it would make more sense if Japan was occupying portions of the United States and then Pearl Harbor happened to make this comparison. But that's not what was happening, right? Like that's not how Pearl Harbor went down. And Russia's been attacked like this multiple times, like throughout this entire conflict. So like, yes, it was a big one. It was the most coordinated, most successful, the most damaging to their military resources, especially regarding their nuclear strategy. But regardless, like, I don't think that this is an analog. But either way, this is an interesting little conversation I thought was worth bringing to your attention. Putin might not respond to Ukraine's Pearl Harbor drone attack. And this is obviously something that's definitely possible. And this is just how this war has gone. We've seen the craziest stuff happen in this war, and the response is never what you assumed it would have been. I mean, just last year, they used an Oreshnik missile on Ukraine. And a hypersonic, medium-ranged ballistic missile that just was insane to watch because it was caught on camera, right? And like nothing happened after that. Like it's like this conflict, and even just here today in 2025, the state of the world, you can't predict how things are going to work out because like it just never goes the way you would assume based on what we've all been taught throughout the years. Mutually assured destruction, right? Well, I guess it doesn't apply unless actual, mass destruction is occurring. Everything else, oh well, I guess, right? So either way, will Putin respond to Ukraine's spider's web drone attack? Over the weekend, Ukraine launched what may prove to be its most sophisticated drone strike of the war. A covert operation deep inside Russian territory that left at least 41 advanced military aircraft destroyed, including strategic bombers. The campaign, dubbed Operation Spider's Web, was reportedly in the works for more than 18 months and executed by Ukraine's security service, SBU. Okay, what will Putin do? Under normal circumstances, an operation of this scale would prompt a quick retaliation from Moscow. Right. If we did this to Russia, it would be a different situation, I assume. I mean, in a way we did, right? So, like, that's the weird part about this whole thing. Like, that might be why nothing is happening, really, in all honesty, right? After all, Putin's responses to other symbolic or strategic losses in the past, like the Kerch Bridge bombing or earlier deliveries of Western tanks to Ukraine, have ranged from missile barrages to escalating threats directed towards NATO. This time, however, it might be different. While the Kremlin has acknowledged the strikes, it has not yet responded militarily, and Putin may well be weighing a more diplomatic or calculated response. If Putin does choose to refrain from launching an immediate new strike against Ukraine, part of that hesitation will likely come from Washington. While U.S. President Donald Trump once hinted at the possibility he would end U.S. support for Kiev, his more recent comments suggest a change in direction. The president has warned Putin not to escalate the war further as he attempts to navigate upcoming negotiations. Meanwhile, Trump has also been advising Kiev to make a deal, encouraging President Volodymyr Zelensky to make concessions to bring the conflict to an end. The silence from the White House following this weekend's strike is fascinating. Reports have indicated that President Trump was not briefed in advance about the operation, or if the U.S. president was aware of the existence of the plan at all. I find that extremely hard to believe that the president wasn't aware, but if he wasn't, our intelligence services at the least were aware. I think to think otherwise is naive, but here we are. This is what we're being told, right? So, with Trump's advisors reportedly split on Ukraine policy, however, any perceived provocation at this stage could alter the balance of these discussions. This is especially true considering that Trump said he was waiting 2 weeks to see whether Putin would make concessions during the next round of negotiations. For Putin, that uncertainty matters. A misstep now could provoke Trump into taking a harder line. What is Putin hoping for? Despite the scale of the strike, Putin likely still sees a path to what he can sell domestically as a victory. If he can extract concessions from Ukraine, whether territorial, diplomatic, or symbolic, he'll be able to present the years-long war to the Russian people as a strategic success. And unlike Ukraine, Russia maintains significant wartime advantages even after the most recent strike. Russia has more manpower, greater ammunition stockpiles, and domestic manufacturing capabilities, and an economy buoyed by oil exports, at least for now. While the Spider's Web operation was impressive, one attack is not a campaign, and Russia is able to quickly relocate surviving aircraft and reinforce its airfields. Without sustained and repeated strikes of this caliber, Russia's strategic posture won't change significantly from here. Still, Putin has reasons to worry, and President Trump is probably the biggest among them. President Trump has the power to crater the Russian economy in a way that Biden-era sanctions couldn't come close to achieving, and his recent meetings with leaders in the Middle East suggest that he's already close to putting economic pressure on Russia, whether that's his intended goal or not. Trump is already in talks with Saudi Arabia and OPEC to increase oil production with the aim of lowering global oil prices. In response to appeals from the president, OPEC announced a significant production increase of 411,000 barrels per day for July of 2025, marking the third consecutive monthly hike. At this stage, despite having more resources than Ukraine, Putin knows he can only absorb so many spider's web-style attacks. He also knows that a reduction in global oil prices could strain his wartime economy, which currently relies heavily on its energy and banking sectors. Between new sanctions and cheaper oil, Putin finds himself at a point where he either needs to make a deal or face major financial consequences. So, we are in a situation now where they might not respond. They just might not. It could actually be that President Trump has put him in a weird spot where there's no real winning in the sense of a response. And I find that interesting, possibly untrue, but if it is the case, that is very interesting at the very least, because I would expect a very swift and heavy-handed response from Russia based on what just happened. Like, if you had to ask me what I would do in that situation, it would be swift and heavy-handed. There would be another Oreshnik missile display for everybody around the world to watch and see, and I'd be like, see that thing that you guys can't stop and do anything about? I'm going to do that again in a more, let's just see, strategic location that does more damage, and we'll just keep ramping it up from there if need be, right? But that's not what's happening, so you have to assume there's things happening behind the scenes that are more strategic or diplomatic than maybe we anticipated. So, back in the chat. Let's see here. I'm going to jump into some of these comments, okay? Got some good people here tonight. Nick, what's up? Good to see you. Could things get bad enough where we don't have water? Things could get bad enough in the sense of not having water, depending on the situation. So, for example, I mean, anyone who survives a hurricane suddenly has no water because all the water in their area is contaminated. So if you don't have water stored, it doesn't matter if you had access to renewable water. None of that water is good anymore. So you need stored water in order to get through the time while things are recuperating, right? So like that can happen, of course. But in general, like not having water at all, I mean, I don't think so unless some sort of massive cataclysmic event occurred where, you know, water all became vaporized, right? But regardless, I think planning on not having easy access to water is a good idea because it forces your hand to create redundancies in the sense of water access for yourself, okay? So that's what I would say about that, Nick. So thank you for the super chat on that. I really appreciate it. And then let's see here. I've got a couple of chats coming through here. So Novi Hora says, Zelensky is not a Slav, and he does not care about Slavs dying on the battlefield, Russians or Ukrainians, as long as he stays safe and rich. And that's something that I'll be 100% honest with you here. I don't know enough about Vladimir Zelensky to just say those things because I just haven't spent the time researching the individual to the point of being able to make those types of statements. But I understand why people have those strong opinions about this individual, especially because of, you know, prior engagements and the way that the entire let's just say, election went down prior to the Crimea invasion and everything else occurring, there's a lot of things that are worth questioning in that region. Let's just be honest with ourselves. And of course, I understand the level of emotion and also the level of what I perceive as basically being anger being directed towards some of these people in leadership positions, because it does at times appear like they are putting their own personal agendas or personal gain ahead of that of the average person suffering and dealing with a wartime scenario. So that's where I'm at on that, just to kind of throw that out there, I guess. Let's see here. Also want to touch a couple others here. I don't want to literally touch a couple others because that would be kind of weird, and I'd be the next internet problem person, which we all have those lately here in the community, let's just say. Dude, we get XP now, says Nick. Thank you for that again. I appreciate the super chat. Great answer about the water. You're welcome, Nick. As always, thank you guys so much for all the super chats and for the support. And of course, if you guys want to support what we do here, if you can like this video, hit the subscribe button if you're new here, because I do this every week when I can, as best I can. But I do have a family, so every so often I got to take a break. But you know what? I appreciate the support of everyone always showing up, especially you, replay crew. Make sure you check it in the comments below, because that's always very welcomed as well. And of course, I do have a private live stream tonight after this one is over. If you want to be part of that, hit that join button down below, become a channel member, or go to my subscribe star, which is in the description of this live stream, and join there, and you can have access to the private live stream where we hang out and talk about whatever. So now let's see here. Take this weekend and practice getting water from natural sources and see how it goes, says SR. 100%. And you know what? In where I live, that would be awkward, because most of the natural water sources are either on privately owned land or right in public areas. So imagine going to the most public area and just starting to collect water on the side of the road. It's going to be awkward, and it might be, kind of a weird feeling, but it'll give you an idea as to how things are going to be and how public that area is, and how it might not be a good idea for you to be there collecting water when everyone else has that same idea, right? So this is a good practice in my opinion, but just make sure whatever you're doing doesn't involve trespassing or anything illegal, because we all know how that goes. Now, yes, the private live stream is kinky, Nick. You're correct. I didn't want to actually promote that here on the live stream tonight, but that's exactly what it is. So, all right. Now, and if anyone is asking, I do not dye my hair. If you're new here, I just want to make sure we touch base on that one more time, because it's such an issue for me, apparently. There are people out there who will not take any of the information I provide or any of the advice or any of the how-to style videos that I put out there as being relevant or credible, because, well, I wouldn't listen to someone who dyes their hair like a skunk. And unfortunately, I am here to tell you that this is just the way my hair grows, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I apologize that my hair grows in such a way that you think it's on purpose because of how good it looks. And you know what? I just want to say thank you, God, for giving me excellent hair and not letting me go bald. I appreciate it. Now, onward. Here's the whole thing going on with this whole Trump situation in the sense of being quiet about the recent attack, okay? This is from Axios, and this is how they are perceiving this. And so I'm bringing this to your attention to give you this perspective as to how this is being twisted and how the mainstream media outlets are let's just say, forming this information in such a way that puts the blame on a voter base rather than just the reality of the situation. So I find that interesting, and I wanted to share this with you just so you could see what's going on in the sense of how people are perceiving these things, or at least what agenda it is they're trying to get other people to believe, okay? MAGA influencers warned of dark forces at play and the risk of dangerous escalation as Ukraine celebrated a historic drone operation targeting Russia's bombing fleet. Listen, I am not what I would consider to be a MAGA influencer, but I did say that this was a risk of dangerous escalation because, I don't know, Ukraine just blew up a bunch of nuclear bombers, right? That's a risk of escalation, no matter how you want to look at it. And risking the possibility of nuclear war is very, unlikable. I don't like the idea of nuclear war. It's just how it is. I don't blame Ukraine for doing this. If I was under invasion from a foreign country and I had the opportunity to blow up a bunch of their aircraft, yeah, I would do that. Of course, that's how war works, right? You attack me, I'm going to blow up your stuff. But this is interesting for them to put this out there as if the idea of that being a risk of dangerous escalation could only be applied to one group of people within the United States who voted for a certain presidential candidate. Like, I'm not sure what's going on here, but I just wanted to bring this to your attention, okay? Why it matters, okay? President Trump has not publicly commented so far on Ukraine's stunning spiderweb operation, in which more than 100 drones infiltrated air bases deep inside Russia and destroyed nuclear-capable bombers. This is true. And in fact, I double-checked this because I wasn't sure about it, and I went on Trump's X feed just to verify, and he put out an entire tweet about the Boulder, Colorado attack, which I understand why, even though that shouldn't have even been allowed to occur to the degree that it did, which we talked about at the beginning of the live stream. Like somebody take that guy out. I'm sorry, but like it's just not happening where I live. But regardless, but yeah, nothing on his stream at all to show that there was anything talking about the Ukraine attack. So to me, that's because we're in negotiating tactics and we're talking about peace proposals and everything else. So maintaining silence until some of those talks in Istanbul are over probably makes sense. But regardless, here we are. So MAGA's alarm over Ukraine attack and comparative silence when Russia targets Ukrainian civilians underscores the movement's deep skepticism of Western-backed government in Kiev. While Trump seeks to present himself as a neutral mediator trying to bring broker peace, pretty sure that's not how that's supposed to be worded, large swaths of his base see Ukraine, not Russia, as the enemy. So just be aware that this is being turned into a political issue based on the mainstream media. But it is true that Trump has been silent on this situation, and so has Putin. So why is that? Well, let's just talk about that really quick, and then we're going to talk about why the West isn't ready for all this stuff going on, and that we have proof of that in many ways. Okay, so Russians react to Ukraine's unprecedented drone attack as Kremlin silence speaks volumes. Okay, now I found this kind of interesting because you can see how the media manipulation and everything else that occurs within a country like Russia really does help to form public opinion. Okay, Silent Guard, thanks for being here. Good to see you. And yes, experiments, indeed. Let's see here. This hair problem will go away as you age if you're like me and go gray. Original Osok said. Yeah, well, the thing is, like, it is because of me aging, though. Like, I'm just getting older, and it just gets more and more white the older I get. But apparently, for some people, they don't like that, right? So what do I do? Now, Nick, did we really land on the moon? Yes. 1, yes. 2, no. 3, yes. But it had buildings and little green people, so they lied about the real info. Nick, I don't know, man. Here's what I think. I think there's a good chance we might have landed on the moon, but I think a lot of what we watched in the sense of footage from it wasn't necessarily shot on the moon. So if that's how you want to hear it, that's what I'm going to say. And I think that's a reasonable approach to that topic because I think you could probably say that that's reasonable, okay? So, Ukraine's drone attack on Russia's long-range bombers was unprecedented. We know that, okay? Monday's front pages were dominated by photos of the wreckage of the bridge attacks. That's what everyone saw in Russia. Not the massive drone attack, right? Because it's embarrassing. It makes the military look bad, the government look bad, and they're not going to promote that, okay? Now, here's the interesting part. The Izvestia newspaper, for example, describes it as a terrorist attack and says it calls into question Kiev's readiness for de-escalation. There's no reference to the scale of damage, and there's certainly no sense of alarm. It's a similar vibe on the streets of Moscow, where we met Irina. She believes the reports of the attack are exaggerated. These planes are very old, and hardly anyone needs them, she says. Another passerby, called Vladimir, says he trusts his namesake, Mr. Putin, to respond when the time is right. This must be done systematically, confidently, and without any kind of nervous breakdowns or any shows of soul, he says. Whatever that means. There's plenty of soul on show on social media, though, where Russia's influential military bloggers are calling for a rapid retaliation. One popular channel called Diva Mayora, or Two Majors, even said it was a reason to launch nuclear strikes in Ukraine. Others are directing their anger at Russia's military command, accusing the leadership of complacency for storing the planes out in the open. Okay, here's where we have another map of those same exact airfield attacks. And as you can see, this map only has 4 air bases, whereas that map we talked about in the very beginning of the live stream tonight had 5. And that's where a little bit of confusion from my end came from, because all the reports I read was that 4 airfields were attacked. So What do I know, though? It all served to overshadow the latest round of peace talks in Istanbul, right? So this is just something to keep in mind. Even Putin's not talking. So Trump's not talking about it. Putin's not talking about it. We had peace talks in Istanbul today, which could be the reason behind that. But it also could mean that people are holding their hands close and not revealing what it is that they're going to do because, well, that would spoil it now, wouldn't it? So there's still a possibility of things getting exponentially worse, and there's still a possibility of major escalation in that region, and possibly escalation against NATO backers, for all we know, especially in regards to cyber attack or asymmetrical warfare. So I'd still be preparing for something to get out of hand here just because of how egregious that attack was in the sense of how much damage it actually did. Supposedly up to $7 billion worth, 41 aircraft damage. I mean, that's a lot, right? Like, that's a huge attack, way deep within the Russian territory as well. But at the same time, like we've seen time and time again throughout this war, there's a good chance nothing will happen too. And we just went through a bunch of information as to why that might be the case. So let's see here. We've got more super chats coming in. Thank you guys so much for that. I really appreciate it. Let's see. The smoke came in with the heat and said, any man concerned with another man's hair is gay. Well, you know what? That's okay, because in reality, that might be true. And if that's what's really happening there, like, I get it. Like, you know, if they like it, they like it. I can't stop them from that. But what I can say is that I don't think it should discount somebody's credibility just because they have white hair. So otherwise, Santa Claus is like the least trustworthy guy I've ever met in my life. Eddie S says, thanks for breaking news updates and tips. Well, you're welcome, Eddie, and I also appreciate that support, because I will admit to you guys that every so often I'm not sure if these news discussions or formats are beneficial for everybody, and I wonder if like this information is well received, or if it's something that people are actually looking for or interested in, or if I should change the format and do something else. Like I'm constantly wondering that, just because of the difference of interest and viewership and everything else related to these live streams. I have a lot of data to work with, and a lot of the data tells me that maybe these conversations aren't as exciting as they used to be. So, I'm trying my best to figure that out, while also making sure that the people who do find this information beneficial and valuable are still receiving it in the meantime. So, like, it's a lot to consider, right? I have a lot of things to try to figure out here, and I'm doing the best I can with it, and I appreciate all of your support in the meantime. David Hicks, thank you so much for hanging out and becoming a channel member. It's always very well appreciated, and thank you for hitting that join button down below and wanting to be part of that private live stream later. I appreciate that. So let's see here. I do want to talk about how the West is not ready for this, okay? Let's talk about the UK suddenly deciding that they need to, get ready for World War III as if we're not already in it. It's really odd to me, and it just shows that the West is recognizing that they're suddenly not quite ready for this. They're not actually prepared for a major conflict, and I think this should tell you something about the current state of readiness of NATO and the Western nations regarding the conflict with Russia, as well as potential conflict in the future with China, who's not... We have to remember, China's not wasting resources right now when it comes to like Ukraine. Yes, they are probably providing small arms support because through North Korea as a proxy, I'm sure some of that's getting through. And of course, technology and informational data and everything else related to what they can provide Russia with, that gives them leverage and beneficial treatment and everything else. But regardless, China's not expending all of their military assets throughout this whole scenario. But you know who is? Large portion of Europe, obviously Ukraine, obviously Russia, and obviously the United States, especially when it came to earlier parts of the war. Don't forget, like, we couldn't keep up with 155 millimeter shells. We couldn't keep up with Javelin missiles. We couldn't keep up with a lot of the munition requirements that were being asked of us. And we were just going to do it anyway and just see what happened, I guess, right? So, like, we're still in that situation where we're trying to catch back up. And we have done a good job of kind of ramping up production, but it's still an ongoing conflict. So, like, at what point are we actually surplusing? That's a big question, right? So the UK put on a war footing with defense overhaul, but is it too little too late? Okay. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced an overhaul of the UK's defense spending on Monday, warning Britain it faces war in Europe. Really? Is there a war in Europe right now? I had no idea. We're moving to war-fighting readiness, Starmer said, as he unveiled the government's much-anticipated strategic defense review at a time of heightened vulnerability on the continent, with the UK saying the threat and instability posed by Russia and other adversaries cannot be ignored. Now, anyway, in 2025. Not in 2022, but now, okay? The UK's defense plans include building 12 new nuclear-powered attack submarines, a boost to the manufacturing of drone, missiles, and munitions, as well as bolstering of cyber warfare capabilities. Starmer said the UK's defense spending would rise to 2.5% of gross domestic product by 2027 and set out the ambition to increase that to 3% of GDP in the next parliament, that is by 2034, when economic and fiscal conditionals allow. NATO estimates suggest that the UK's defense expenditure as a share of GDP was 2.33% in 2024, above the alliance's 2% target set out in 2014. One of the UK's priorities was to strengthen the NATO coalition, the Prime Minister said, adding that Britain's defense policy will always be NATO first. Okay? Now, here's the thing. We're talking about stuff in 2034 at this point, right? 9 years from now. That's kind of a little bit late, right? If things really pop off, that might be a little late. But let's also talk about why this isn't even going to work and why the West just isn't ready for this, right? I know we're at the hour mark, but we're going to do it anyway because you guys need this information and I want you to have it, okay? Here we go. I find this to be pretty interesting, to be honest with you. Okay. UK Defence Review says AUKUS is on schedule, but fears remain over possible capability gap for Australia. Now, this is in relation to those 12 nuclear submarines. Listen to this and just keep in mind that like all the countries involved here are supposed to be currently ready with a wartime footing regarding the fact that Russia, a major nuclear superpower and adversarial country in many ways, is at war with a European nation. Like this has been going on for 3 years. The West is showing its colors right now, at least in my opinion, based on this information alone, and that's why I wanted to share it with you, okay? The UK government has declared it will put the first of 12 AUKUS-class submarines in the water on schedule in the late 2030s, okay? So like 14 years from now, right? No big deal. We got time. No big deal. Despite its own major projects agency saying the plan to build the nuclear reactor cores needed to power the submarines is unachievable. Okay. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has released Britain's Strategic Defence Review, which argues that the AUKUS submarines are critical for the UK's defence, and declaring a landmark shift in Britain's deterrence and defence moving to war-fighting readiness to deter threats. The UK's capacity to design and build the first AUKUS submarine on time and on budget is critical for Australia. The first Australian-built AUKUS nuclear submarine, based on the UK design, will subsequently be built in Adelaide and is expected to be delivered in the early 2040s. Any delay or cost overrun in the UK program could leave Australia with a capability gap of no submarines, with the aging Collins-class submarines already extended potentially decades beyond their scheduled service life, and doubts over the supply of US-built Virginia-class boats. The Strategic Defence Review says the first of up to 12 British AUKUS conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines will be in the water and operational in the late 2030s, the optimal pathway timeline previously announced as part of the AUKUS agreement. With new state-of-the-art submarine patrolling international waters and our own nuclear warhead program on British shores, we are making Britain secure at home and strong abroad, the UK Defence Secretary John Healey said. But the UK government's own major projects agency has described the UK's plan to build the nuclear reactor cores needed to power the AUKUS submarines as unachievable. In its latest annual report, released in January this year, the Infrastructure and Major Projects Authority gave the nuclear reactor core project its lowest evaluation. Successful delivery of the project appears to be unachievable, the report said. There are major issues with project definition, schedule, budget, quality, and/or benefits delivery, which at this stage do not appear to be manageable or resolvable. The project may need rescoping and/or its overall viability reassessed. Under Pillar 1 of the ambitious and controversial AUKUS agreement, the U.S. will sell between 3 and 5 of its Virginia-class nuclear-powered submarines to Australia, the first of these in 2032, 7 years from now. However, legally, the U.S. can only sell the boats if the then Commander-in-Chief The U.S. president certifies that America relinquishing a submarine will not diminish its own undersea capability. The U.S. Navy already has a shortfall of submarines expected to worsen over coming years, and shipyards in America are running up to 3 years late in building new Virginia-class submarines, a U.S. Navy report found. A recent U.S. Congressional Budget Office report found America's submarine industry is building 1.2 Virginia-class boats a year, well below the 2.3 needed for the U.S. to meet its own needs and fulfill its commitment to Australia. AUKUS is forecast to cost Australia up to $368 billion to the mid-2050s. Australia is providing significant subsidies to the industrial bases of both the US and UK. It's already paid 798 million Aussies. I don't even remember what the Australian currency is. The first installment of 4.7 billion Aussies pledged to the US. It will pay 4.6 billion to the UK. The former South Australian Senator Rex Patrick, an ex-submariner and AUKUS skeptic, described the UK shipbuilding program as a cluster fiasco industry, trying to put unachievable reactors into unachievable submarines. And that's why the West is not ready. We're talking in terms of decades. And we don't even have the ability to achieve getting these things done within those decades. The US is at half of production capacity for where it needs to be for the UK's nuclear submarine plans to even come to fruition. And Australia might not even have any submarines in the meantime because of the UK needing the submarines in order to produce everything related to them, while the US doesn't have the submarines to sell to Australia in order to cover their naval deficiencies. So it's... And we're talking about deliveries in like 2038, in the 2040s, we're talking the 2050s. Like everything can happen between now and then, right? Is China or Russia or any of these other adversarial nations going to wait around until Australia is fully capable with all their submarines, and until the U.S. is capable at producing the right amount of submarines, and until the British actually have 12 nuclear submarines? Like, why would they wait for that? And we're already in war right now. Like Russia is already at war with NATO and the UK and all these other countries via proxy Ukraine, right? So we're so far behind already that the countries that want to actually improve their military standing aren't even capable of doing it anymore. It's like already too late. So you as an individual need to be prepared, because our militaries, whether or not you're in the UK or you're in Australia or if you're in the US, right? The US has the best chance, right? Because like of the military spending and everything else related to what we do militarily. But even then, we're not at the production capacity required to even meet our obligations that we've already signed on to. So we're in a weird situation. The West is not ready. Like we're not capable of producing what we need to produce in order for everyone to have what they need in case an actual wartime situation breaks out between these superpowers, including China. China has the largest naval fleet in the world now, right? And a lot of people will say, oh, well, that's because they count all their fishing boats as well, right? And I there's probably some truth to that. But regardless, like they are continually investing and improving upon designs and creating more and more, high-tech naval ships every single day, in the sense of design and engineering and everything else related to testing and drills and everything. Whereas like our allies are talking about buying our, 30-year-old submarine designs so that they have something in the meantime while they make their new submarines, which won't even be ready for the next 14 years, right? So you really have to look through this from a lens of like we're not properly prepared for this. We're just not. The U.S. has the best chance of being prepared because of what we do. But even then, are we going to be able to bail everybody else out? Like, it's not looking very good, is it? So that's what I wanted to make sure you were aware of tonight, is that it's not just because like these attacks can happen at any point, which they can. These drone attacks are no joke. Those same cargo trailers could be parked at your local Walmart right now, right? Those same cargo trailers could be parked, right across from Big Ben if you're in the UK. Like they could be anywhere. The Ukrainians just proved it. They just showed that it doesn't matter even if you're a technological military that is at a state of war, we can still get these into the position we need them at and launch. So apply that to anything else you want to apply it to, and it does create a large level of concern. My corner T-bar. Mr. MP, thanks for your content. Law of the minimum. Well, thank you so much for the super chat, and thank you for always being so supportive. I appreciate you. And look, I'm doing the best I can to give you information that I think is important, information that I find fascinating, and advice and tips and suggestions about how to be better prepared for some of these scenarios if they ever unfold. And hopefully that information is taken to heart and provides you some value. And so if it does provide you value, please feel free to share with other people. Sharing these live streams around is one of the only ways that they actually gain traction because I have had so many people reach out to me recently saying, hey, I don't get notifications for your videos anymore. Hey, I don't see any of your videos pop up on my feed anymore. Hey, I didn't even know you've been doing live streams for the last year. I haven't even been notified, right? Like it's constant when it comes to people telling me that they're not being told about the content being put out on this channel. So the only way it really gets around is if you share it and if you like it and if you interact with it. So leaving comments, talking in the live chat, all those things help a lot. And I can't really express how much I appreciate it. So thank you all so much for all the support. And I honestly hope that things do cool off. And I do hope that this peace proposal actually make some gains. And I hope that we find ourselves in a resolution here soon. That's my goal. Like, that's what I would prefer to see happen. I don't want a never-ending conflict. Like, I want peace. It makes life better for everybody involved. But I don't think that's what everybody wants. I think that's what I want. And I think the majority of you likely do too. Okay? I am unforgivingly American. At Magic Prepper, with that metro hair, you need a purple glitter leisure suit. Just saying, LOL. I hope that's facetious because I literally talked about how my hair is just my natural hair in this live stream earlier and how it just grows this way and that I get so much crap for it that I feel the need to address it on a regular basis. So I hope you're joking with me, and if you're not, now you know, because I just had to say it again. And I love that about all of you, though, because at the very least, it's entertaining, right? And I appreciate that because I still like to have a good time, too. I'm not some doom and gloomer who wants to just sit here and tell you all the bad stuff constantly happening, although my analytical data would say that that's what most people do want. So there's that. Just to be real with you guys. Sorry, it's the truth. But regardless, I like to have a good time. Let's have a good time, right? So if you want to have a really good time, hit the join button down below or join my Subscribe Star. The link is in the description of this video. And I'll go ahead and put it in the live chat too. It's $5 a month. It supports the channel directly. And some people feel the need to do that, and I appreciate that. And of course, you can come hang out in the live chat, which is literally in like 3 minutes. So we're going to wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for being here. Always appreciate all the support. Anything else you need from me at all, magicprepper.com has a ton of stuff, ways to support the channel that don't really involve any additional effort on your part when it comes to affiliate links, discount codes, all kinds of stuff. Magicprepper.com has you covered. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.